Well, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started here. It's a pleasure seeing all of you today. Hope you got some sugar and some coffee. And I can grab some before it disappears. My name is Bill Bales, and I am in our customer success unit at Microsoft. And I support most of the states here in the Southeast, state colleges, as well as some of the public universities. And my goal is to help customers realize value with what they purchased at Microsoft. That could take a bunch of different flavors, like driving engagements and projects, as well as bringing experts in to help walk through technical difficulties and complexities. Our panelists today, I'm just going to say their name and their title. You can read more about them in your program as well as online if you'd like to, or come up afterwards and talk to them. Jill Albin-Hill, the Deputy CIO from Auburn. Moriah Kent, this is a long one, yay, AI implementation specialist, gopher gal, and an instructional designer from Auburn University. Yep, I added that in there. Rachel Moorehead, Executive Director of Infrastructure and Operations at UAB, and Lawrence Cappello, an Associate Professor of History at the University of Alabama and Co-Director of UA's AI Teaching Enhancement Initiative. So welcome to all of our panelists today. Again, you can read more about them in your brochures. Today, I hope our discussion is insightful for you. We're going to think deeply about the use of AI in tactical ways. And so we're going to ask our panelists who have pretty good experience in AI over the last 2 years, I would say, and even beyond, about how they gained that momentum in their own institutions. And we'll also talk about recommendations and best practices as you drive AI initiatives on your own campuses. The format is going to be kind of more of a formal interview. So I'm going to ask them questions, and each one will be able to participate in that together. And I want to make sure that we're ready. Panelists, are you ready?
I am not ready.
So just panelists, I'd like to remind you to use the mic if you pull it up when you speak. I'll always start with you, Rachel. Okay. No pressure at all. Yeah. Each of you are in different phases in your adoption journey with AI. Each of your institutions are. What can you tell us about that journey? And also include where you were headed.
All right, can you hear me?
Clearly.
There. So UNB has been on its AI journey for a while. We instituted a student success chatbot right before COVID hit. It wasn't, generative AI, but it was a very traditional model chatbot. And so we have long been looking at this. And when generative AI really came onto the stage and when it really started being disruptive, we knew we had to address it quickly, fast, and getting adoption. So what we did was a lot of community engagement, a lot of community involvement. We reached out to a lot of our vendor partners and did different AI days, brought them in to have research, focus sessions, but because we are a medical institution. So we had a lot of conversations for doctors, for medical researchers, for typical instructors, and then just, administrative units, how we can use it to make it more effective and to help us with our students. So long story short, we are, I would say, very much at a peak for our AI adoption. We have a lot of it already out of the gate, both at the end user perspective, right? We have Copilot for our end users to use to protect our institutional data. We have on-premise kind of more garden LLMs that people can use and researchers can use to really advance their research and move it forward. We have an AI working group that evaluates every vendor that says, hey, we're going to tag AI on our name. So there's so much that goes on just bringing AI into Canvas. And so much is just reusing a lot of the same roads that you already have for so many of your other initiatives. So I don't want you to hear all of that and think, oh my goodness, this is a hill. No, this is a hill that we have climbed many, many times. And so we were just excited to start charting this one a little bit earlier. So we have a lot of great feedback from our end users, from our students, and from our functional partners, HR, finance, and student success. So feel free to let me know if you have any questions.
Reminder, I'm Jill Albin-Hill, Auburn University. So I don't feel like we've been quite on that journey in the same pace, not before COVID. I think some of our early use of artificial intelligence was maybe a bit broader, but when the LLMs and the large language models started coming out a couple of years ago, I think it took another turn. In fact, I'd say 3 years ago, when we started talking about how do we do automation, we actually had some conversations in our engineering about robots. Like, it's not quite what we have in mind, right? We're talking about different computer-based repeating tasks and the like. So there's been an idea about what it could do. I think it's just the most recent disruption is how I categorize it. And from my perspective, I'm in probably Rachel's role for Auburn, and it's more from an infrastructure and IT. We think about it a lot, but what I see this phase or this disruption is the ability to bring it to the people. Right? Get rid of the barriers, make sure that we have the infrastructure to do it. And so we started dividing use cases, if you will, between what was research, what was academics, and what was business operations. And I think that was just to help us get organized and not feel so overwhelmed by it probably 2 years ago. And then really started accelerating last summer as we looked at the availability within our Microsoft stack, the protections that we needed. But we took a look at all of our enterprise applications and what were they doing. And we're mindful about there's different purposes. So how do we yet again think about the right tool for the right use case? That's why the use cases really come back to being important. That journey then, we'll talk a little bit more later about the exploration we've been doing, the betas that we ran, what we've learned from that. And I think that clear separation between what we're doing in research and the needs of research, the infrastructure needs, you heard NVIDIA talk today, what do we have for compute, the academic space, certainly what do we expose our students to, what are they ready, are the faculty not afraid of it, those the examples about the calculator in 1989 was disruptive too, having those so that they're buying into it. And then really, how does the business impact? What's the business operations? And I'd say we've taken more creative license even in that space because we stopped asking permission and started really getting people involved. And that's where I think that it will accelerate in that area even faster in the next year.
So where you'll hear from me later.
That's
wrong. Seize the rhythms. Hi, I'm from the University of Alabama. There's a lot of AI activity at the University of Alabama. We across research, teaching, and learning. On the teaching side, we have an AI teaching enhancement initiative that I co-direct, which is all about upskilling faculty who have limited knowledge about AI and how they can start immediately incorporating it in the classroom. We do that in partnership with the UA Teaching Academy. The Teaching Academy has also launched a series of asynchronous modules for new faculty that they can use as well, and in conjunction with that. On the research side, we have a Center for the Advancement of AI that does a lot of things. We also have my colleague Matt Hudnall, who was just speaking downstairs at the business school, who incorporates a lot of AI into the work that he does. And we also have a $100 million high performance computer that we're debuting very soon, which is obviously thinking a lot about AI and how things will play out. That said, our AI usage, we're part of the Microsoft ecosystem, but our AI usage is spread across those areas, and we haven't entirely centralized. We're not trying to be promiscuous. I mean, if someone wants to put a ring on it, they can definitely do that. But it's a thing where we also have a centralized AI future forum that's come through our provost office that our senior associate provost has handled. So all of these units are in conversation with each other constantly and thoughtfully, and sharing information about what we use, the many pitfalls and many benefits of that. And we just want to make sure that as we scale, we'll do it in a thoughtful manner, in a phased manner, one that prioritizes our different agendas, and one that, of course, really places a premium on privacy and security and ethics. And on that last note, we are also through an NSF grant and a number of faculty in the middle of pioneering a lot of research on what AI ethics looks like, what AI ethics pedagogy is.
Let's jump on that. And what about responsible AI? Where do you guys land? How did you come up with the vision and adoption?
So I came to AI as a skeptic. I teach legal and constitutional history, but my area is the right to privacy, and I'm also a working privacy professional. I think it's how I was able to bait my way onto this path. So we take these things very seriously, and that's something that we could all talk about for hours. So let me stick to my wheelhouse, which would be privacy. One of the ways that we're going to focus on privacy is there are the 2 points I want to make. One is, as we're talking about how new AI is, we're driving home this recognition that AI or privacy problems are in a lot of ways not new. They're the same privacy problems we've been talking about since maybe processors became a big thing in the 1970s and that we had big debates over. It's a lot of the same issues with access, making sure people have access to data, that they know where it is, that they have the ability to correct that data, that the data is not being shared in ways that we find objectionable or that violates federal law. Also protection against distortion, which would be that data reflecting something about that person that isn't really true. AI just in a lot of ways accelerates these privacy problems that we've been talking about for a while. So one thing we're saying is, don't reinvent the wheel. There are certain solutions that already exist and problems that have been well defined that we simply need to just continue to scale up and approach in new thoughtful ways. On the complete opposite end of that spectrum, AI is super new, and these problems, while this might manifest in very different ways. So one thing that we're being very honest about across sectors and that we're letting everyone know is some of the best discussions I've heard today constantly talk about we're all fools if we're trying to predict the future. We can see near term, right? But this technology is so interesting and so fluid that to think that you know what's going to happen 3 to 5 years from now would be foolish. So as we create systems to protect student data and protect student privacy and handle AI ethically, we need to realize that once we put them in place, there's going to be a relentless auditing mechanism that needs to happen. Because we're going to have the best intentions and we're going to have smart people putting together these plans, and then things that we just didn't anticipate are going to pop up. And it's going to hopefully be no one's fault, and there's no enforcement mechanism that's going to come in and start firing people or suing people. But we need to be clear when these issues happen. We need to communicate with each other that they've happened, and every 3 to 6 months, see what these new problems are, and then adjust and recalibrate our systems. Where ethics and privacy with AI, the not sexy kind of almost somewhat boring part of it is that real protection will be a relentless monitoring and updating every quarter, every 6 months, every year, whatever timeline works for you, of having professionals come in and see, is this working, or what needs to be adapted, what needs to be changed. That is not sleek and it's not elegant, it's kind of ham-fisted, but in the end, that's what actually protects things like privacy when it comes to AI.
All right. If you're comfortable answering, what about responsibility?
Yes, I will use this tiny mic to answer. Can y'all hear me okay? I think we can talk about ethics. Obviously, it's incredibly important and crucial at like the institutional level, and this checking and monitoring is so important, but there's also that individual component as well. And so here at Auburn University, especially in our co-pilot beta program and in all of the learning that we provide our faculty and staff around AI, ethical AI is at the center of that conversation. And so for an individual, that can look like going out and knowing what your institutional policies are. At Auburn University, we have an AU advisory guide on generative AI tools. Everybody should know that that's out there. They should be familiar with that. Everybody should know that they shouldn't be entering PII, FERPA information, HIPAA information, taking those lessons that we learned from social media and applying to our everyday, just general cyber hygiene, if you will. And if you didn't know, October is cybersecurity awareness month. So this is a great time to be focusing on that as an individual, but also as an institution. I just add a couple of thoughts because I didn't mention our AI at AU. I think that maybe earlier today it was mentioned by somebody else, but that organization was started by 2 faculty. They've really taken the lead in having bi-weekly ethic panels. So they do different speakers. That's really been part of their mission, to make sure that they're promoting ethical use of it. And then from the scientific side, how do they build models and the influence of that. So I think they've really taken the lead and taken that responsibility. On the academic side, same thing, you know, Moriah said the things that we've been teaching the faculty, I think they're mindful, but then how do we make sure the students are understanding that role, that ethics? And we've had a lot of those debates too, like the turn it in type of software. What do we do? We're going to check for it. I'd rather teach them about how to use it responsibly than to have to check for whether it was used or not. So I think there's really a lot of leadership that the Big EO Center's been bringing in that regard. And then on the business side, again, I think that's where my interest has also come up between the cybersecurity, between the rights, the responsibility to put guardrails around the environment. And I think AI has risen some concerns in the fact that, you know, for several years, we've been using some of these tools and we've shared documents across the organization. And what we're finding is we tend to overshare. Right, and it wasn't necessarily by intention, but if our settings on sharing a document is default to share with everybody, and then anybody with a login can get to it, so it's somewhat protected, right? You have to have a credential. But did really somebody in accounting need to share that spreadsheet with everybody with a login? You know, as the human, we probably never find it. But with AI, it's surfacing anything that you have access to. So I feel our responsibility is to make sure that we put those guardrails back up, that we clean up some of that stuff. And that we own some of that, but we also have to teach the users that they own some of it too. Right? Document labeling, sensitivity labels. We've been slow to adopt that because we thought that it would be too hard for the users. It's like, it's their stuff. Don't you think they want to label it as confidential? And that we should have data loss prevention policies that help them to adhere to that. So we're not emailing out stuff that shouldn't be. So I find it as a place that we're finally getting the tools to actually do the things that we've had policy for and reinforce it. So we don't have to just go with the goodwill that people read and know and follow the policy. They should, but we're also going to have the systems to support.
Great. Rachel, thoughts on responsible?
No, that's perfect. We also went through a very similar discussion at UAB around over permissive use of files and collaboration. And one thing, especially as we start to branch out of the Microsoft ecosystem, we are a Box user, we're rolling out Box AI, we're starting to leverage GitHub, GitHub Copilot. You know, as some of these large ones Zoom AI, you know, they're not always going to come with some of these great compliance and data loss prevention tools. So we have to understand at a university level, you know, what is our acceptable use, how we're going to audit for it, how we're going to educate for it. A lot of it is just end user education. And so refactoring a lot of our cybersecurity education that we do on campus to include a lot of these AI topics. And kind of on a different approach, you know, we are working with Google on a grant AI tool to help, you know, people find grants, to make grant connections, and potentially to write applications for grants. And, you know, is that an ethical use? Is that a correct use for the granting body? You know, how does that affect our reputation? A lot of, you know, with ethics and responsible use, you have to look at the university's reputation. How can we use our confidential information, our privileged information to maybe inform some of those decisions? And so, you know, we have a lot of those great conversations, and those are conversations that are happening in the community. They're not IT-led conversations. They're led out of the Office of Research, or they're led in the department meetings, right? We're having a conversation with the CS department on how to help them maybe have like an auto grade, right? So many of the CS auto graders, the computer science auto graders, they're built off of unit tests. So, you know, you either pass the unit test or you don't with the code. But what happens now if we're using maybe something like GitHub Copilot to give them generative AI responses back to the students? Well, we can't really control for hallucinations in that aspect. And it's not really compiling that code. It's just kind of giving you feedback on the form of your code or the formatter. It thinks it is correct. And so where is the instructor's responsibility to the student in that feedback that the chatbot is giving back to them, or the auto grader is giving back to them? So, you know, we're having these great conversations. I won't say that we have solved them, but just sitting down with the right people, because we have these subject matter experts in our universities and they want to have these conversations. So just bringing them together is a good way we're going to tackle a lot of those ethics and responsibilities.
Keep the mic legit. Make it practical. So you've got a lot of things in flight. You mentioned some of them. You can go deeper if you'd like to. What's the impact? What are you seeing in terms of impact?
I think we're seeing a lot of excitement. I think if you can make it real for one user in one department, they can go forward and be an advocate in their department. And so really trying to create those sparks for people, and we're doing that with training hubs, with centralized kind of teams training. We're doing it through our Center for Teaching and Learning. They do employee training as well. So helping and partnering with them to do, hey, how do you use Zoom AI effectively in a classroom? And, instructors are coming to those and they're learning how to use Zoom AI in the classroom. And so just kind of being a part of the conversation to kind of help make it practical for the end user. Show them how, hey, there's this cool little tool tip, basically, right? Maybe in a newsletter of how you can use it to find, what should my day look like? Ask Outlook or ask Copilot, what should my day look like? And it can go through your calendar. It can maybe help find follow-up things for you that maybe have dropped off your plate. So, having this kind of tool tips, doing a big PR campaign, having a lot of good training are definitely keys to making it real for the end users. And at that point, the adoption is groundswell. And it really helps to make an impact locally.
I'll share a couple thoughts, but I think Moriah can share more about our actual beta group and the results. We did it very intentionally, so we've got some impact by the numbers. But I will say, just editorially, what I've seen in getting that group together is the real example of getting IT out of the way, right? Both from a tool perspective, giving people the tools they need, but to make sure that our role is getting the barriers removed and giving them the possibilities. So seeing a group come together and really crowd swell stuff or crowdsource, because I think the approach of that group coming together, sharing use cases, sharing their struggles, helping each other out so they don't feel like they have to ask somebody from IT. They start to ask each other. So I see it as a great real example where we're thinking about modern work, probably for the first time for a long time, not just since email, right? That we've really thought about how we're doing our work differently. And then I see the professionals across our organization working with each other and thinking about their work in a different way. And then saying, I think things could be better. Help me get there. Like, I want to be the help me get there, but they need to come up with what those things, those ideas are. And this is an opportunity to do so.
So just to add on to that, I want to talk a little bit about the Copilot beta program that we've been running here at Auburn University. So we started it in earnest in April. We have over 120 participants using Copilot and 365. So that's that integrated Copilot across the Microsoft graph. That we have all three governance groups are represented in our program, including students, representing 23 different colleges and departments across campus. So we have a really great cross section of folks using Microsoft Copilot daily and providing a lot of really great feedback. So our program was sort of taken a three-pronged approach for it. That's training, social learning, and check-ins. So our training is mandatory. We ask folks to complete about 3 hours of training. Of course, you can always watch videos on speed. But that training, we created one module of it here in-house. So it really brings it home to our Auburn family. It helps them connect with our Auburn policies. We're talking about using AI responsibly at Auburn and what that looks like. And then we leveraged our partnership with Microsoft and LinkedIn, and we pulled in some LinkedIn learning courses around using Copilot in Excel, Word, and the different apps. And so we asked folks to complete that. And once they complete that, they're then added to a Microsoft team. Formerly, our M365 Copilot beta team, recently renamed Tiger Tech Leaders. Very catchy. So this is a group and this is a space where, again, we've leveraged our partnership and our collaboration with Microsoft because they're in that team. And we have folks sharing successes, challenges, questions daily. Really, it's a very collaborative effort, again, across campus. So maybe even connecting folks that may not have worked together previously, even across governance groups, which is huge. And then that third piece of that is regularly scheduled bi-weekly 30-minute check-ins on Teams, or if you can't make it, you can use Copilot to summarize the meeting, right, and ask questions, right? So we found again a lot of really camaraderie and a sense of people coming to that, knowing, nobody's an expert in this, right? So we're really collaborating. And I'd love to share a little bit of data with you from that, because we ran a survey in July. It was our first sort of big use case survey. We had some internal questions, but we also used the Microsoft global benchmarks, of which there are 4. So our Copilot beta program reported that 91% of users felt they had productivity gains, 87% of users felt they had a quality of work increase, 85% of users felt they had a reduced mental load using Copilot, and 91% of users felt that it increased the speed of their ability to do their job. Because we have over 100 users, we also have been able to leverage our Viva Insights. And I just checked yesterday, and we have over 120 participants right now. And our Viva Insights are showing us that we have, in the last 4 weeks, so last month, 255 hours of Copilot assisted work at a value of $11,000. That is valuable time that our employees are turning around and reinvesting into mission critical relationship building and problem solving.
It's great. Thanks, Lauren. Keep going, Lauren. So what impact?
Yeah, I'll keep going.
You got it.
I got it. All right.
Take up number.
I'm gonna speak about faculty upskilling and what I found. So originally, we found the enthusiasm to be shockingly high. We piloted a program for a workshop in the previous semester at the college level. Within a few hours of announcing it, we already filled our seats in terms of people who were interested. We then scaled up at the university level through our teaching academy, increased the seats exponentially, and then still on the first day had 3 times the amount of applicants that we had seats, and that was again just on the first day. That said, there are still faculty members who are positive that I'm like the devil and I'm going to usher in the uprising. I mean, that's always going to be there. But as I said this morning when we were talking about faculty upskilling, I think we've all noticed that we're at a point where people have started moving through kind of like the 5 stages of grief, where 2022 in November when ChatGPT dropped, we were all in a very negative space. And I think even a lot of the real hyper-resistant people have started to soften and realize it's not a fad and that it's also not the end of expertise or humanity and things like that. Our faculty workshops, you have to be practical. It's bring your own device. It's in a room not dissimilar to this one, a space that seems very collaborative, and faculty sit next to each other, and we kind of open them up and we're like, try this prompt. And we have them try a prompt that will be in line with a class that they do really well or a lecture that they do really well. That one that like when you're getting it observed, right? That's just polished and perfect. The one that always goes well every semester. So we can see the limitations. Like we make sure their first experience with prompting is with something they know really well. And they'll find, I think, something surprising in that the AI gave it something they didn't think about, but also be thoroughly unimpressed with a lot of the stuff, and they realize it's not the depth of expertise. From there, though, we want to make sure that we're teaching them ultimately AI is an iterative process. And so we have follow-up prompts and let them see a progression. Anyone teaching AI to faculty has to realize that there is no one and done. We all know this, we use these tools. The teaching them the behind the scenes, how the sausage is made is essentially you keep drilling down until you get what you want. That opens up a lot of doors. And I think once you expose people to these tools, the learning curve is like so much easier. The real challenge was when we were going from paper files and then suddenly you had to learn like how to use Microsoft Word, right? And Excel. No, that's like a 20 lesson workshop, right? That goes across the board. These tools are so intuitive that honestly, it's easier for us to upskill now than it was 2 generations ago. Back when people used to put like computer literate on their resume, right? Like I didn't use the Microsoft Office suite, and everyone's like immediately hired. You're immediately hired, right? So that's something that's there as well too. It's but it really does. The stuff does kind of sell itself, and there's a fun component to we get people in the room with bring your own device because we tell them we want this room to be chaotic. We are going to leave you to your own devices after we show you some basic prompting, and we really want you shouting out when you saw something cool. We want you shouting out when you saw something stupid. We want you shouting out across the board, and that's easy. It's so intuitive. And then when you tell them also, hey, if you don't know the answer to something, ask it, right? And it'll tell you the answer. That demystification process, I think, happens so quick. And the trick that we're really thinking about now is how then do you take that group and then inspired go off and tell their colleagues that what's going on, because you need to create a certain virality among faculty. It's easy. I'm gonna stop dominating this in a second. Sorry. It's easy to get junior faculty along, right? There's a hiring crisis. Everyone's happy to have a job, right? And so you're just like, hey, if you're really good for your tenure file or for your reinstatement application, if you take this workshop, everyone's gonna yeah, of course I'll take the workshop, right? They're gonna drive in. That's easy. Talk to somebody who loves teaching, but who's been a full professor for the last 15 years, right? And they're gonna be a little more skeptical. They've seen different generations of administrators, and the rhythms of the campus change. So how do you get faculty like that involved into this technology? You do it by finding the one or two other faculty members in their department that they respect, who've seen it there, and have them be like, hey, this isn't that bad. Like, actually, it's kind of cool. And that you don't do it by like pitching them the same way that you. So recognizing that too, that there needs to be a certain staggering in approach that senior faculty are going to ingest this and should be approached differently than junior faculty. That's something that's really involved. And at the end, as I had said earlier this morning on another panel, approach people from the skeptic's point of view. If you walk in and you're like an AI evangelist and you're like, this is going to change your life, everyone's like, nah, I don't know. Right? Like it just seems like you're selling something. But if you start by basically saying, hey, there's a ton of contexts where this is absolutely not appropriate in the classroom, where we still need to teach old school critical thinking skills, students need to have their own solutions to their own problems. And that immediately, I think, puts people's guards down and has them be more receptive. It kind of lubricates the discussion about, so then when is it appropriate? Because, and then that starting from a position of negativity and skepticism in this context ends up giving you better results and having the faculty recognize that you're being realistic about this and that their concerns about what will be lost. And we're going to lose a lot because of that, right? We should all be a little bit sad that this technology exists. Like we should. And that's an appropriate feeling, but it's one of a kind of full spectrum of feelings that we're all going to feel as this comes out.
Why is that okay to feel sad?
Because it is a little bit about the depth of expertise in humanity. It's not entirely, right? And it's something you need to go through there, but like, come on, man, who doesn't love like Dead Poet Society, right? Who doesn't love the idea of just like, you know what, like, there's less of a premium on genius now, right? Like, and that's cool. It's like, it's a democratization there, but I don't know. I think people who were super special 20 years ago might not be as special. And I'm saying that as the guy who's like team AI, right? Like it's just no, but it is, and we should acknowledge that. It's there's an upside, but there's also a downside. And being the college professors, like keep it real, right? Like and they'll respond to that. I think if it's a pitch, it falls flat, particularly with senior faculty.
Before we move on, folks, do you have panelists, do you have other comments?
We both do. I also think like around the depth, right? It's also the depth of like tasks. And some of us may take joy in some of those tasks. It's just like a change of season, it's a change of life, and there can be grief in that, and that's okay. I love what you said.
I couldn't help but think of, have you heard of the app called Shazam? So death to the person that could name that tune and play it. It's like, where's that skill? No, Shazam does it in an instant.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's all right.
I can still be.
Let's go, Chris.
Can I beat Shazam? Amazing. But I really like everything you say because I think it's also. It's another example though of you gotta not make it about you. It's gotta be about them. Right, and that means we have to know what they're experiencing. What is it that they're doing? What's their work involved? What problem are they trying to solve? And if we can spend the time as humans together doing that, then I think we can find the bridge to get us all over it.
Any comments? Otherwise, I have another question.
I don't think I have anything of substance. I think it's all, and it was beautifully said.
Okay, Several of our peers in here are in different areas of your journey when you're at your institution. You're maybe in one spot, you may identify with some of the panelists and where they are in their journey. Rachel, what would you say to your peers about how they can advance and gain the leads and move to drive us to success?
That's a good one. So one thing that I do personally is, and you know, I think most of us do this in technology, right? It's like maybe one of the first interview questions you get is, how do you stay abreast of modern technology? And so many of us go out and maybe read Reddit or have news feeds, or you go somewhere to find information to see how it's being used. And you know, if you have an Apple or a Google device, you know, they're listening to you all the time and they're going to push you content that are things you need, and that's probably AI. But you know, I would say just making yourself open, finding ways to be open to what's coming in and figuring out how you can transform that for the person you know across the room. And so much that comes across my desk, right? So I'm in infrastructure, I'm running servers, I'm running data center. But you know, if a banner thing comes across my desk, you know, I'm sharing that with my banner colleagues. So try to be the promoter in your area. If there's nobody else in your area that's really clued into AI, try to be that person. Find news articles that are relevant to your business partners. Meet with every single one of your vendors and ask them what's on their AI roadmap, because you know they probably have one at this point. And so, you know, be that person that's inquisitive, because, you know, like we said, it's not going to be these task-oriented things that we're going to be doing anymore. It's going to be this knowledge seeking. How can we seek out knowledge? How can we share knowledge? And then how can we elevate that knowledge across campus?
You know, I think about what we're embarking on after beta and how do we, the pitch that we made to leadership. And so my thought was, we had to advocate for people. One of the things I heard even from faculty when we had our AI day in January, when we started talking about all these great ideas, was there was a concern that once again, they're going to be left behind because maybe they're in a college that is what they think is underfunded, right? Or are they going to invest in their faculty the same way that the big colleges do? And I think that I saw one of my roles as being an advocate to get university support for innovation in this space. You know, we always try to say we're going to be innovative. Well, here's a real one, right? Let's put the money up. And getting some support, we did a grant, so we're still waiting on that, but to know that we've got support to scale up to 1,000, 1,200 users on behalf of people for this next year, kind of with that agreement that we're going to track our usage, we're going to responsibly report back on what we think to the institution the value of that investment is. But I think being willing to be the advocate for the movement is an important piece, because I think individually it's hard to make the case, even if it's only $30 a month and you do it, but budgets are tight, right? So how do we tie that to it? And it's still so speculative about what that output's going to be. And so find ways, whether that's in partnership, because I think that's the other success factor, partnering across the organization made it an easier sell. Doing it by time box. So 1 year, and here's what we're going to report back on, and be committed to doing it. And that's what I think is helpful to get off the dime.
I have a question for you all. If you had to summarize today in one word, your takeaway, what would it be?
Opportunity.
Okay, not what I was looking for.
Balloon robot.
That's my boss. My best.
Balloon robot.
Okay.
That's what you would see.
Energizing. Okay, say the word.
Energizing.
Yeah, energizing. Okay, excellent. I'm so glad to hear that. I would also say that a number one takeaway, something that I have heard in literally every session, including this one, is collaboration. This work cannot happen well or safely in a silo. You have to be willing to reach out and find your collaborators. I think I'd like to also acknowledge that that requires a level of vulnerability. We have to go into collaboration recognizing that also no one is an expert right now. We're figuring this out together. And so I would say identifying your collaborators, working with people, and sharing, like Jill said, sharing those resources, advocating for yourself, your teams, and the organization as a whole.
I think for most of us, we mentioned privacy and ethics, we think like, oh, that's that HR module I need to take and check the box and not think about until next year. And in a lot of ways it is, and that's fine. We also think about compliance. It's something that we care about because we don't want to get in trouble for a FERPA violation. It's something we also think about because, you know, there's institutional mechanisms that, I mean, private sector mechanisms that are going to make us care about this stuff. It's good, you know, you won't get cybersecurity insurance unless you have certain safeguards in place, right? So the simple fact is like, no university can operate without that insurance. And so even if we slip, private industry will pick up the slack because they stand to lose a lot of money if they don't do that, right? So we could all take comfort in, I guess, helping us solve some of these problems, which is weird, I know, but in plain language, try not to lose sight of like actually why this stuff matters and why these laws are there in the first place. You want to know why privacy matters, why student privacy matters, why you actually need to pay attention to these things. It's 2024. We all have snippets of information that we just fall out of our shit every single day as we walk. Your ability and your students' ability to control the information that's out there around and how it's used is essentially the way that they're able to control their reputation. It's the way that you're able to shape the way that others perceive you. That is essential to navigating modern society. Your ability to control what information other people know about you. It gives you control over what privacy scholars call your sense of personhood, right? And the perceptions of that personhood. And it's just important not to lose sight of that. It's essential to operating in the world. And losing it, you lose just so much of your agency. And that's the stuff that we're protecting at the end of the day. And why that stuff matters, and it's worthy of argument.
Folks, I want to open it up for questions, and those of you who are online, if you want to go in the chat, ask your question and we'll get to it shortly. So yeah, raise your hand and I'll try and repeat the question. Chris.
I'm gonna put you on the spot, Moriah.
All right.
I'm just kidding. This is directed to you. So we're talking ethics and adopting and people that are really smart to use the technology instead of trying to give it the Heisman. So in that context, we're hiring a new teammate. And as I reviewed several of these cover letters, I kept seeing the same opening paragraph repeated by about 5 or 6 different people. So my question then to the panel is, should I be encouraged by their utilization of artificial intelligence? Or should I be disillusioned by them not being putting forth the cover letter that is all out of their own?
But someone who really was good at artificial intelligence would have known how to sidestep that. Like you would have seen, again, it's an iterative process. So what you would have gotten was the first version of that, which is probably what most of them sent you. The person you want to hire is the one who went 3 layers deeper. It was like, hey, rewrite that first paragraph in the language of Ernest Hemingway or Dorothy Parker, right? Like, and then have them adjust it from there. You know, like, and it's, you're looking for that combination of originality that shines. And you're like, wow, this person just like step down from his New York Times bestseller to like, you know, apply for this job. Like that's the one that you knew flew you away, right? Like that's who you want to hire.
Other candidates.
That was an excellent answer. I don't know. Yeah, add to that.
Well, I don't know that this is exactly to answer your question, but to me, it comes back to responsible use, right? And I was at a conference earlier this summer, and I love the way somebody put it, that we should think about it as an intern. You all get an intern. Everybody gets an intern, but you wouldn't have the intern turn in your resume or your final draft. You need to make it appropriately yours. And when I've talked with people coming along my own journey with it, when I use AI a lot, I use Copilot a lot, but it's my work that I submit, you know, it gets me started, but it's my responsibility to make it mine. So that I don't feel like I have to put a disclosure on every paragraph that I'm sending that this was generated by AI. I do it sometimes for fun, and mainly with notes from me. But I think that that's a personal journey and an acceptance. And I would still say I'm a little reserved sometimes. And when I know I'm speaking with somebody or I'm giving something to somebody that hasn't drank the Kool-Aid yet, it's like, do I want to really say that I used Copilot to do all of this? Because there are times that it is real quality, right? But I have that responsibility to make sure it's mine. So I wouldn't hire anyone.
Okay, I like the bold, not it depends answer, but very room for.
Would a my instructor found on that, if they didn't say that they used it, then yes, they all plagiarized. I mean, but at the end of the day, you copied and pasted something from the internet and passed it off as yours. So yeah, no, they would not get that.
Okay, I appreciate that. Great answer.
Other questions, folks? Yeah, in the back.
Just going along with the hiring thing, I've also been hearing that, even in interviews, people are having the live transcription of the interview running on the side of the screen while they're talking to the interviewer. And it's generating the answer that then they're reading. So they don't even have to, pass the skills-based interview. Uh-huh.
The use of like AI in courtrooms now, where you have like opposing counsel or judges or prosecutors, like having a transcription and then adjusting. I'm not saying it's happening in the courtroom yet, but it's all the tools are there and it's discussions that are happening yet. Yeah.
And if they're not disclosing that they're recording, I mean, that's a whole other issue.
There's a question right here.
I had a question regarding just the acceptable use policy in general. So, as far as the different spaces, research, academics, business operations, like I'm on the business operations side, not academics, but should there be, or do you all have an acceptable use policy for non-academic, so to speak? Just curious.
So we have an acceptable use policy in general. And then we have AI guideline framework that we have.
Same, I'd say an acceptable use. Really about all technology. We've not adapted it because this is just another one, right? The list is long, but so we need to know acceptable use, and we have that for technology professionals and then everybody else that's engaged in technology. We have the guidance. We haven't done a policy yet, and I think as you heard Dr. Ali say this morning, I think most of all of our policies really govern this too, right? If you step back and take a broader approach to it.
Let me stop there. There's a question online for you, Rachel.
Oh, sure.
And they wanted to know if you could walk through the grant AI tool that Google's doing, what that looks like and how you're addressing it.
So we learned about that through our partnership with Internet 2. Grant AI, I would say, is like a research project, kind of for Google. And so they're still, working on it, is still being actively developed. But I believe we were maybe either the first or the second in the country to have an active implementation in a pilot. And we were able to do that with a third-party partner, Solemn out of Georgia. But basically, it's using different components of Google's cloud and their AI backend to, give a nice little web interface. It plugs into the NIH granting database. And then they can use, just common speech for their searching utilities of that database. They can maybe put in what their research focus is, and it'll give them back kind of a listing of the active grants, how much they are, when their dates are due. You can click on it, go deep on it, and then there's a button right there to say, generate my application. And that gives them basically a huge pre-prompt of maybe a common scenario and framework and format. And so they can just go in there and edit it however they want, and it'll give them the first iteration of their draft. And then they have to copy that and paste that out, work on it as needed, go through all of your reviews, and then you can actually submit it there too. And then there is a second part to it, which is to help you find collaborators. So it searches PubMed, it can use your Google Scholar profile and help you find other PubMed articles or to summarize PubMed articles to help you find those collaborators. So that is that side.
It's great. Folks online, if you have follow-up, please let us know. It'll be great. Other questions in the room? Yeah, so in the back.
Really a question. I just want to say that I appreciate the skepticism part. Like, I don't feel like I've really heard that. So to just hear you guys as professionals, say it, I really appreciate it. And I also think it's something that we all, in whatever our world or wheelhouse is, it's approach things with, when you're teaching somebody new, go ahead and throw that right out there. And I think it will benefit the learning process. as well as like engagement and collaboration. So I myself just appreciate like the honesty of like, yes, this is really cool, but you should also, I mean, I approach it with like, it's amazingly scary is how I approach AI. And I think too, when you think about things being special, like, I don't say this to my kid, but I say to others, like, I think she's amazing, but she's not special. You know what I mean? Like that approach too, she's not special to everybody. So anyway, I just appreciate the honesty.
And I'll say too, I use a metaphor, use that first time. I equate it to, you had to get really good at searching, right? And a lot of times first, Ask Jeeves or whatever you were using came out, the search responses were not always great. It wasn't until really Google came on the scene and Bing came on the scene, they wanted to get you on that first page. But you have to learn how to search, and AI is the same way. You have to learn how to iterate through to get the actual result you want.
We have time for one more question or comment.
So I have a question, nobody else does. So something that I have been giving a lot of thought to is what decisions do we need to be making now to keep us from being in the movie Idiocracy? How do we make sure Rondo is good for plants doesn't get into the system? Has everybody seen that?
We should show some clips.
That was very much maybe a
Tell us.
nerd. So
I'm sorry.
So we need to make now to make sure Idiocracy isn't our future in 40 to 50 years. That Rondo isn't good for plants, which is like a Powerade, right? Gets into the system. How do you can't really get data out from China?
It's a Sagittarius movie, what do you call it? Satire?
Okay.
I think it's like that.
Yeah.
There's a design principle in engineering. I'm not an engineer, so if there are any here, forgive me. There's a design principle in engineering that is really big in the privacy community. It's called privacy by design. Has anyone ever heard about this? So for most of the history of cybersecurity and like mainframe processors, the way privacy protection works and data security works is, hey, we have this system, and then let's build privacy safeguards on top of the system. What privacy by design is it means that from the beginning of the development of the platform, whether it's hardware or a software platform, you bake the privacy protections into the DNA. So what happens is instead of this thing being like layered, which then becomes kind of like an imperfect armor, you from the core DNA kind of component of it, you build in those protections. And also, a couple of you mentioned default settings, and I think that we're looking for practical solutions right now, just like I had a lot of fun today. There's also been a lot of abstract discussion, right? And there's no shade. We should be talking that way. But all right, the United States of America has some of the weakest data protection laws of all the advanced democracies. This is not a controversial observation from like a legal perspective. Everybody kind of agrees with that, even if they disagree on other stuff with data. If you buy an iPhone in the United States, or like most phones in the United States, if you want to make it the most privacy friendly you can, you have to go watch like a 10-minute YouTube video. And it's like, hey, press this and do this and do this and do that. If you buy the same iPhone in like Spain, all those settings are out of the box the way it works. Like the things that are out there. Those little tweaks, because there's a law that says that these platforms have to be privacy by default. Making sure that your default settings, when you talk about privacy by design, that's a really good way to like think about it. Make the default settings on all of this new tech and all of these new models and all these things we're building. If you're teaching students how to build models, which can be really liberating for a 19-year-old, right? Like when you're teaching faculty how to build models and use these things, make sure that as you're doing that, teach them to build as default settings, the ones that are the most ethical and the most privacy friendly. And then if they want to start chipping away at it to give themselves more benefits, they can do so incrementally and be more aware of what they're using. But I mean, so many of these problems happen and like we don't even realize what we've done because you didn't realize how much you needed to calibrate. So I think that's a good way to start is not layering perceptions, but there's going to be so much new building happening. And as these things are built, bake those ethical kind of guidelines into the way those things work, and then let the human beings choose how much they want to kind of then move the sliding scale into ways that could maybe be more problematic, but also give you like a higher reward, right, off of what you're trying to do, and skirt the line and that's more complicated.
Folks, we ran out of time.
Of course, we gave me the microphone.
So, thank you.